Voters turned out in record numbers and delivered an historic victory.
Everything we know about this election tells us George Bush lost this election.
Well, in some of the precincts, there was an 80% undervote. That means 8 out of 10 people who came to the poll did not care enough about the presidential race to vote. I don't think so.
The targeting of people of color is very computerized.
Computers are the new 21st century threat to the voting process.
Look at the pattern of the past few elections. We have every reason to believe that the 2008 election is going to be manipulated.
This only happened because a guy like Bruce Funk said, I'd like to know what we're using. Come on in and give them a look.
It could change the outcome of every election. Whoever was in power could stay in power and manipulate elections, whether on a local level, state level, or a national level.
The lawyers for Diebold were flown to Emery County, where they had a meeting behind closed doors, and when Bruce Funk, an elected official, showed up for work the next day, he was locked out of his office.
They did not want to know what was in those machines. They were not interested. They were strictly there to get rid of me. The commission chairman came by my office. I said, I'm not going to resign. I said, I believe I need to be here and document exactly what Diebold does to those machines. And he told me, he says, that's not going to happen.
It was treated as a national security issue by the top scientists in the U.S. It made the New York Times, the Washington Post, Newsweek, CNN, but Bruce Funk lost his job. How do you have a private corporation come in and exercise any kind of control over an elected official? Basically what that means is you had a private corporation saying the will of the people doesn't count in Emery County, Utah. You elected him, we say he's out, so he's out.
(1:51 p.m. Tuesday. As Air Force One touches down at Andrews Air Force Base, the president first learns of network exit polls showing Kerry ahead throughout the battleground. Dejected, Mr. Bush tells his confidant, Karen Hughes, the numbers are what they are. I'm surprised.
It caused celebration among Kerry forces, panic and then disbelief on the president's team. It even caused the markets on Wall Street to drop sharply. These polls are paid for by a consortium of major news organizations, NBC News included.
The evening of the election, having seen the exit polls released during the day and having seen the tally turn out so differently in the evening, to me that was a shock of the first magnitude. And in fact, you know, to use an analogy from the financial services industry, it was the world's loudest burglar alarm. And to my, I guess, shock and amazement, nobody was listening.
The exit polls have been used by the networks to project election results with great accuracy through the years. We've relied on the exit polls for many elections now. They have a history of at least 40 years. In 2004, we saw something very different. The discrepancy between the exit polls and the vote counts was off the charts, and this was a new phenomenon.
The exit polls were more accurate than the voting that took place that they were supposed to be measuring.
It's certainly much more convenient if you want to believe in the future of your democracy, you don't want to have your whole day ruined, to basically say, well, of course the tabulated votes, that's gospel, and the exit polls must have had a methodological flaw. If you look at the exit poll sample as a whole, there were some 13,000 individuals chosen to be a nationally representative sample. A sample size of 13,000 generates a margin of error less than 1%. What we saw was a discrepancy that was so much greater than that.
Statistics can tell you what the chances are when you interview 13,000 people that you'd be that far off. And, you know, it's somewhere, I won't bore you with the numbers, but it's somewhere between, you know, astronomically impossible and ludicrously impossible. So it just didn't happen by chance.
Nearly all the experts are in agreement that the exit polls could not have been so far off that they gave distorted results. It's far more rational to assume that the voting process was compromised.
So what happened with the caging list? Election day, 2004, the Republican Party challenged over 3 million voters. 1,090,000 of those voters found their ballots tossed in the garbage. In what states? In Iowa, in New Mexico, and especially in Ohio. That elected the President of the United States. So what was the problem? The problem for the Republican Party was this: if over 1 million voters cast illegal votes, a felony crime in every state, how come no one was busted? Then a gentleman named Karl Rove, political assistant to the President of the United States, started contacting United States prosecutors and said, arrest them. We've got the list. Bust them. But there was one problem for the U.S. prosecutors. When they went hunting through the caging lists for the illegal voters, they didn't find any. And 8 of those prosecutors said, we're busting no one. So what happened to these few good men, these U.S. prosecutors who wouldn't bust innocent voters? Every one of them was busted. Everyone was fired. In the 1992 film, A Few Good Men, Tom Cruise portrays a young military prosecutor fighting for the truth. It was based on the real-life story of Captain David Iglesias.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Greg Palast.
Greg, hi, David Iglesias.
Hey, how are you, Captain?
Hey, I'm doing just fine, thank you.
So can you handle the truth or not?
Absolutely.
George Bush named him a U.S. federal prosecutor.
They wanted a political operative who happened to be a U.S. attorney, and when they got somebody who actually took his oath to the Constitution seriously, they were appalled, and they wanted me out of there. The 2 strikes against me was I was not political. I didn't help them out on their bogus voter fraud prosecutions.
Last December, they fired the captain and 7 others. Iglesias charges that he was fired after a meeting here between the president and his chief political operative, Karl Rove, because, Iglesias says, he refused to attack Democrats. What we know is that the Republicans successfully challenged the right of over 1 million citizens to vote in the last election. The Republicans used a system called caging voters, a scheme exposed 2 years ago by Newsnight. We revealed then that the scheme was run by a man named Tim Griffin. When Bush's Attorney General, Alberto Gonzales, sacked Captain Iglesias and 7 others, he replaced them with Tim Griffin, the caging man, and Griffin's allies. But when called before Congress, Gonzales couldn't remember what he did in December.
I don't recall everyone who was there. I do not recall exactly when the decision. I don't recall, but I do not recall knowing in my mind. I have no recollection about that, but I presume that that is true.
He lost his memory. Now he could lose his job. It didn't help Gonzales when his assistant, Monica Goodling, testified that his people concealed from Congress the truth about Tim Griffin.
I believe the deputy failed to disclose that he had some knowledge of allegations that Tim Griffin had been involved in vote caging during his work on the president's 2004 campaign.
After my broadcast about the caging and Iglesias for BBC television, I got a call from the office of Congressman John Conyers. He's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. I was to meet Conyers at midnight in a hotel room in New York and show him the evidence that I had of Karl Rove his assistant Tim Griffin, and the caging operation. By the next morning, Tim Griffin had resigned.